Good morning to all of you in the webinar. I'm here with Jean-François. I hope you're all well and in good health. First, a practical arrangement. When you logged on to the webinar, you should see a window to your right where you can ask questions. Don't hesitate throughout the webinar to put in questions and we will handle them at the end of the webinar. But let me first take a few minutes to put a webinar into context. So what you see on this schema, Jean-François, if I can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So what we do at Agelos is help enterprises in the whole data supply chain, going from data, including data integration, over to analytics to get finally insight to help you transform the company. Today's topic is about making your data estate ready for analytics and AI. So you can situate today's webinar in the left part of this diagram. On the next slide, you will see an overview of all the webinars we've been conducting. This is the 5th one in a series of 6. Next Thursday is the last one, is about data replication and also about automating and making your data ready for analytics. So it is in a certain aspect similar to the one of today, but it extends towards also real-time replication in case you would have needs in your company for in real-time replicating your data to make them ready for analytics. And with that, I would like to hand over the word to Jean-François.
Good. Thank you very much, Edwin. I hope you can hear me clear and loud now. We will talk today about the data part of the graph that Edwin has shown you right before this my intervention. So let me talk first to explain you a little bit what we mean by taking care of the data. So one of the things that is important there is, of course, that the data that is getting to your organization is getting more and more big. The data is growing in complexity. It's also getting more and more difficult to access because you will have a lot of data everywhere in the company and outside your organization also. So, of course, it makes it difficult to access the data, to make sure that your data is correct, to govern your data, to maintain compliance. So that's one of the big challenges that you will have in these times. And those data challenges that you encounter are actually often hindering the companies. Actually, more than 96% of the companies, which a study showed, to reach the next level of interactivity, which is the artificial intelligence. So the big difficulty there is that, most of the projects that are actually trying that need data are not successful because of this data challenge. So this is really something that is becoming critical in many organizations. Next to that, I also explained that the actual data regulation and compliance is very important. You heard a few years ago about the start of the General Data Protection Regulation, and because of these regulations, it's very important that your data access, your reporting, your analytics are always traceable, that they are fully documented, that you can prove that you're always in control of your data, that you can test it properly, and that you can manage the access of the people. So there are a lot of requirements that come on top of the fact that you need this data access. So talking about data access, when you look traditionally to the business intelligence solutions, well, of course, we have been accessing data for many times in the past. This data has a lot of different sources. So it could be text files, it could be databases, it could be also data that comes from the cloud, from other applications. It can also be big data that you find in Hadoop or other data sources. You really have a lot of different kind and types of data sources. And many organizations also started to build some reports. So they built some, they're using some query tools to get access to this data. And there are many different tools that are actually being implemented in the organization. It could be Excel, it could be reporting tools, it could be dashboards, a lot of ways to get access to the data. So as a result, what you get is that each of these applications are actually connecting to the underlying data, and it really becomes quickly a problem because you don't have the same way of talking to the systems, and you have a lot of different an approach with a lot of different data silos that are actually serving all those different front ends. So to solve that issue, organizations started to set up different type of layers in between to actually combine and centralize this data. The problem of these layers that you put in between is that actually you still need a lot of different tools to manage that, to maintain that, because you need tools to extract the data, to ensure the data quality, to build a data model, to automate your data so that it gets pushed to the right people. You have to define some business semantic layers. So all these things are actually needed in order to manage and to maintain that. What we want to propose here is an approach in which you're going to centralize and to put together all these little black bubbles, so that by putting it together, you would have one single solution that will actually be able to access the raw data, but also to serve it at every level on the front-end side. So the solution we propose is called TimeXtender Discovery Hub, and it has three different layers or components inside it. And the reason why we separate those things is because they are actually answer different needs. If you look at the bottom one, the ODX, it stands for Operational Data Exchange. It's actually a place where you're going to put together the raw data so that the power users that were previously accessing the data through this maze that you find here, well, those users can still work in the same way, the power user, by connecting to the ODX. So it's an exact copy of the underlying data. But of course, then you start to cleanse the data, to make it available, to combine multiple sources together, to ensure that the data is valid, and you start to build a data structure that we call the modern data warehouse. This can be done in different layers, of course, but the final result is that you have a structured storage of your data. That data warehouse, again, will be there to serve not the power users like before, but more the business users. And you could even, on top of that, add some business definitions, some metadata, some business understandable descriptions of the data, and that's what we call the semantic layer, so that you can also serve the casual users. So you see different levels that you're going to put together, and that will bring those three layers: the operational data exchange, the modern data warehouse, and the semantic layer. And all of this together can be managed within one single solution. And that's the solution that that we want to put forward today, which is called TimeXtender Discovery Hub. So what is that? What does that that platform allow? Well, actually, it allows to fully automate whatever data process that you want to put in your environment. So it allows you also to very quickly and in a very agile way develop your data transformations and your data movements, so that you at the end can get a data set that is centralized in a modern data warehouse structure. Of course, it's important that you can work both on premise, or if you want to combine it with clouds, well, it is of course very important. Why should it be fully automated? Well, of course, because you want to have directly access to your data. You want to make sure that the data can be served in a service way and that it is fully compliant. So the Discovery Hub solution that we want to present here, to propose here, is a product that comes from a company that is called TimeXtender. So TimeXtender it's a Danish company that has actually a lot of different customers all over the world. So it's not a small, I would say, a small solution that has been developed somewhere in a garage, but it's a solution that has already been proven by since a lot of years by several thousands of customers, and that are actually distributed all over the world. So this is the solution we want to present today, and also to explain how it and to demonstrate later on. And it is called TimeXtender. So TimeXtender, why is it called TimeXtender? Well, of course, because time is money, and of course, if you need a lot of time to set up your data warehouse, your data marts, it will be a lot of costs that will stand next to it. Actually, when we look currently in the way we're going to set up your data, we call that a data estate. Well, you are going to build several layers, and this is of course important because at every layer you have you get an answer to a different need. For instance, many organizations start to set up a data lake that allow you to combine and bring together raw data. We have discussed that also in the previous webinars. So we bring together the raw data on a single platform and make sure that all the data can be combined together. Then we're going to consolidate it to ensure that you keep the history, to ensure that it is governed. So that's the warehouse part. And then we want to push it to the business users to make sure that that you get a model that can be used by those business people, and that's the mart level. And all these different levels, of course, well, need to be set up in the organization or outside or in a combination. And these are very big projects that are costly, that consume a lot of time, and for which you need a lot of people with different skills. Because if you want to connect to a database, you need database skills. If you want to push it to a front-end tool, you need reporting skills or business intelligence skills. You need a lot of different skills to cover that. So what TimeXtender actually is in this modern data estate is what we call rapid data estate development. So that means that all those different levels can be managed by the Discovery Hub. It means also that you can push all this data to different front-end tools. So you see here on the top, for self-service analytics, it's going to serve Power BI or Tableau software or Qlik, as we have explained Qlik Sense in one of the earlier workshops that we did in the last weeks, or even other front-end tools. And it can also be pushed to more advanced analytic tools that allows you to do artificial intelligence, that allows you to data scientists to analyze your data. So it's really, the purpose is to bring it in a central place so that it can serve a lot of people, and also to access a lot of sources behind, different disparate sources that could be coming from data lakes, from the clouds, from different layers of your organization also. That's what Discovery Hub is enabling. And of course, if you want to set it up, well, you can set it up in the clouds. And TimeXtender is actually available directly as a service in Azure. So you could deploy it in the cloud, either by combining it with a SQL Server database that is a managed instance, or a combination of a data lake within Azure together also maybe with a dedicated database, so you can work with all this. Or you can also work on premise if you want to install SQL Server on your premise and you want also to use SQL Server for your central place. These are the different options that you get. Important is that Discovery Hub is really working hand in hand with Microsoft technology. So that's why you see here SQL Server everywhere. Does that mean that you cannot use Discovery Hub if you have your data in something else than SQL Server? No, because you can use Discovery Hub for all types of data. If you're having already a data warehouse in Oracle, or if you're using a data lake, or if you're using data in other formats, you can still use Discovery Hub. What is going to happen is that Discovery Hub is going to bring it together in the central place, and that this central place will be SQL Server. But the SQL Server can be both on-premise or, for instance, on an Azure cloud. So that's the solution we want to propose here. But I think I've shown enough slides. I think it's important also that you see the tool in action, like we do in our other webinars. So let me show you the tool. Good. So this is what the tool looks like. So what you see here is different layers. They are represented here in the Discovery Hub with different columns. So you will see here that you have the ODX layer, which is the operational data exchange layer. You have a staging layer next to it. You have a warehouse layer next to it, and you have a semantic layer next to it. And what's going to happen is that you will be able to move from the original source all the way down or up to your actual dashboards. So in the original source, the first thing you do when you set up an ODX is you're going to access different data sources. So we have here an example of two different data sources, a legacy database and another database that is residing in SQL Server. You could also access files. You could also access a lot of different types of sources, like adapters to ERP systems like Microsoft Dynamics or SAP or Salesforce or other connectors. You could go to different databases. As I said before, you can connect to DB2, to Oracle, to any data source. And you see here at the bottom that you also have the CData data source. So what is that? Actually, the CData data source will give you access to the CData connector. And the CData connector is actually allowing you to access a lot of data through the web. So it will allow you to speak to a lot of different systems. And you see that there is a very big provider list that is getting downloaded now, so that I can show you all the different connectivities that exist. And you can start to define them. I want to connect to an LDAP server. I want to connect to Azure. I want to connect to Hive, to Dropbox, to Facebook, to my email system, to eBay, to whatever, to FedEx, to Google Analytics. So you see you have a lot of connectors that you can use and that are actually supported by CData automatically when you start using TimeXtender, because they have a partnership together. So all these different data sources are actually automatically loaded. And the only thing you need to do is when I go to my system, I just have to check here the different data sources that I want to access, the different tables. Like for instance, if I want to add here one of the tables, like the sales territory, I click on this, and what's going to happen is that my sales territory table is automatically added to my ODX. So I don't need to do anything. I don't need to write SQL. I don't need to write code. It's going to be added automatically to my ODX. Everything behind is going to, there is a table that's going to be created. The table is going to be filled. All the, you see also that you're going to take all the different constraints from your source. So everything will be taken over in the ODX system. Once the ODX has been filled, what you're going to do is you're going to move now data from the ODX to the staging layer that you see here, the DSA. So for instance, here we selected a few tables, like the customer categories, the cities, the people, the order lines, and with drag and drop, we move it here to the staging layer. Then we started to actually start to transform the data, for instance, by denormalizing the data. It's one of the common things that you do in data warehousing. You're denormalizing the data in order, for instance, to create, to cleanse the data, to create a star schema, to make links. So that's all the things that you do here in your staging layer, or for instance, here to make a summary. What you can also do, for instance, is to create new fields. For instance, here we have our orders that are linked with our order lines. And in my order lines, I'm going to add, for instance, a calculated field that you see here. It's called a field transformation. And in that field transformation, I'm going to create a formula. So these are all things that you can do inside inside the TimeXtender. Once you have created that, you're going to move it towards your data warehouse. Again, here in the data warehouse, you can define links between the different tables. And once you have defined that, you're going to define a semantic layer. So in the semantic layer, for instance, here, I have defined a customer dimension. I have defined some order lines, and within my order lines, I've defined some measures like total sales. If I look at my salesperson, I also have defined some relationship between these. In my customers, I've added the customer name. So you see, you can start to define all these things directly in the semantic layer. Everything is done here in TimeXtender, Discovery Hub. And then I'm going to define an endpoint. So the endpoint is going, that means that I'm going to push all the data that I have transformed towards a front end. So it could be, for instance, a Tableau report, or it could be through Power BI using an analysis service tabular endpoint, or it could be to Qlik. That's what I've built here. I've created a Qlik endpoint, sales, and I'm going to push that towards my Qlik app. So if we go now to Qlik, you will see now that you have a Qlik app with the dashboard that contains all the data that is loaded. So what is behind here, behind the Qlik app, is that you have, if you look here at the data manager, so I will go to my model. You will see here that in this data model, you have a star schema that is being generated automatically by TimeXtender. So I didn't have to write any Qlik code to create this source, in which I have my star schema with order lines, person, customers, and so on. So these are the things that you find here in the semantic layer. If I push that to another front end, like for instance Tableau, you would see the same thing, but in Tableau. So the good thing is that you have everything centralized in one place. But of course, what is also important with TimeXtender Discovery Hub is that you can manage this at all times. So what you can do, for instance, is say, okay, now I would like now to maintain this. So we have a dashboard, and so one of my end users here is looking at the dashboard and is telling me, well, actually that's nice, but I would like also, we have sales information, but I would like to add some invoice information in that dashboard. Can you do that? Well, actually, yes, I can do that. What I will do is I'm going to go back here to the ODX, and I'm going to see if I have information about my invoices. And I see here that I have invoice and invoice lines. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my invoice, which I'm going to put here. And I'm going to take my invoice lines, which I'm going to put here also. So you see, each time I make a change, there is a little red star that is going to be added. These are new tables that I'm going to add in my staging layer. Now, because here I'm in my staging layer, I can now start to denormalize the information. So that means that I'm going to link the invoices with my invoice line based on the invoice ID. By doing that, I create a relationship. And because now I have a relationship, I can take the customer ID and put it back inside my invoice lines. Or I can, this is what we call denormalization. I can also, for instance, take the invoice date and put it back also in the invoice line. So you see, you just drag and drop the things, And by doing that, by dragging and dropping the data, it's getting added here automatically in my invoice lines. Now, what I can do now that I have this in my invoice line, I could, for instance, add an extra field. For instance, here, what we're going to do, we're going to create a new field. We call that total invoice. I need an N. So total invoice, make this a numeric field. Okay, so we have a field now that is added that is called total invoice. And I want to calculate this field as the unit price multiplied by the quantity. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a transformation inside here. And this transformation will be the, so if you look here, you have the unit price multiplied by the quantity. Okay, I created a formula. Very well. Now I have my unit price multiplied by my quantity, which is now the total invoice. Now, if later on something changes in my data, everything is still linked together. So for instance, here, if I modify my unit price, let's, for instance, rename this and call it, because this we are now becoming international, so I have a US dollar price instead of a euro price. Well, actually, if you look at the total invoice is still unit price times quantity, but the system is smart enough because it knows that the unit price is actually coming from the unit price USD field, because this field has changed, and it knows that it is there is a relationship between the two. If I would have defined that in SQL code, I would have to change all my SQL code everywhere. So this makes it much easier to manage and to maintain. Okay, good. Now I have created here my total invoice. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the invoices that we have added here in the staging layer, and we're going to move it now to the next level, which is my data warehouse. So we take the invoice lines and we move it here to the data warehouse, and we will even call this invoices. Okay, so I took my invoice line, I moved it there, and this is now a new fact table that I added in my star schema that is called invoices. Now, because this is a new fact table, I want to link it to some of the existing dimensions that I have here. For instance, here I have my customer ID. If I take my customer ID, well, actually, I can link that with the customer ID that I have in my invoice. So I create a link there. I also have, for instance, a date. If we take here the date table, we have the date that is available here, and I want to link this date with my invoice date that I have defined inside my invoice table. So I create a relationship also between my date table and my invoice table. Let's make this a little smaller so you can see it well. Okay, there we have now the data, the table that has been added into my star schema here, my warehouse. Now that this is done, I want to push this to my semantic layer. So what are we going to do? We're going to look at the semantic layer. We see here that we have information about customers and about order line. But of course, if you look here at the order line, this order line here is actually the order date. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add my my invoices directly here also in my semantic layer. And let's take, for instance, the total invoice as a number, and for instance also the quantity, and we call that invoice quantity. Okay. Now it needs to know if I want to link this. I want to link this to my customers because there is a link with my customers. It was already defined before, so I can select the link with the customer. I also want to add the date another time, but now we want to add it as the invoice date because we had the order date before. So we will now add it as the invoice date, and the invoice date will, for instance, give you the ability to create to look at the invoice here. And you could also add the invoice year month. Just an example. Good. By doing this, now, of course, because I created, I have a link here with my invoice date, so I will propose the existing link also with the invoice date. This is all I need to do. Now I have created, I've just added all my invoices in my semantic layer. What does that mean? Well, that means that now I can execute all this. So we're going to deploy and execute the complete project. And what TimeXtender is going to do, it's going to, so we added some invoices like this. And the system is going actually to load all the data that I have selected. It's going to create the tables. It's going to generate SQL code. It's going to automatically move the data from one place to another, and at the end, finally populate also my my data warehouse with the new data that I have created. So I don't need to maintain this, and I don't need to create this to adapt this. It's going to build that automatically, and you see also that it's going to optimize the way it's going to load that. I said that I had 4 CPUs, so it's going to parallelize the execution, and it's going to because it knows the dependency of everything, it will do it in the right order to make sure that your data is finally loaded at the end into my data warehouse. I can do that in a smart way. For instance, say that I would like only to populate the invoice table and not the other tables. Well, actually, the system will be smart enough only to load the data that is necessary for my invoices. So now it has finished loading everything in an optimal way. So that means you see that now all the red has disappeared in my different levels. So that means everything has been loaded correctly. So now what I need to do is I just need to push this towards my QlikSense app, because the QlikSense app application still exists. It says that it's already running, so I'm going to push. Remember, we had a QlikSense application like this. If you remember well, you see that the app already exists. So I want to update the app, and behind you have you had this star schema. Now, if you want to update and reload the data, it's what we're going to do now. Now have a close look to what is going to happen with this star schema. So now it's pushing the data towards QlikSense, and what happens is that it's automatically adapting the schema that you have behind QlikSense, and it's added my invoice table and my invoice date. So all this happens automatically. We are talking really about full data warehouse automation, and that goes all the way down towards here my dashboard. So that means that now I have the ability, if I go back to my dashboard, I now have my invoices available. So that means if I search now for my invoices, you will find the total invoice, and you will have the ability to add the total invoice directly inside your QlikSense application. My total invoice next to my total sales, which is still linked to all the different selections that you do into the dashboard, because everything is associated within QlikSense. So you see, the step from the raw data all the way towards the front end is just managed centrally by TimeXtender. And the fact that everything is linked together gives also a lot of different other advantages. For instance, I have now added the data here into the invoices, the invoices into the dashboard. Well, let's say that one of the end users would like to know the total invoice. Where does this number come from? And if you don't remember that, well, you can go back to TimeXtender, and you're going to look here at the total invoice that you have created here in the semantic layer. Well, actually, you can visualize through what we call data lineage. You can visualize from where this total invoice is coming. If you look here, you'll see that the total invoice is coming from the total invoice table from my warehouse, that is coming from a total invoice table in my data staging area, that goes through a transformation that makes the calculation unit price times quantity. And if I want to actually change that, I just double click here, and it will bring me exactly to the place where we have defined that in TimeXtender. Or I can even go to the original source. So I click here on the unit price, and it will find back the unit price in the original ODX where the total invoice is being calculated from. So you have this full end-to-end data lineage. You can do the same also in the other direction. For instance, here, if we are looking at my ODX layer, and we see here in my ODX layer that I have a lot of, you see here you have a lot of fields, and you would like to know where these fields are used. Well, you can again do that. For instance, here we have fields about people. You see, you have here specific people that are defined here, and I would like to know where these names of those people are used. Let's say, for instance, these are this is sensitive information. I have password information. I have a phone number. Things I don't want this to be used. To be accessible too easily. So I would like to know where this is all used. So again, you can say, I want now to do some impact analysis, and it will tell me, well, this full name that you have there in your original source, it is actually used in several different transformations, and it's actually going towards a salesperson, but also towards a contact person, and that will finally come together into the orders table and so on and so forth. So you will know exactly where this data is actually being pushed to. Because it is sensitive information, well, what I can do is I can tag this as sensitive information. So you see, you can tag this full name as a sensitive information. If we take the fax number, we will tag that also as sensitive information. And if we take, for instance, the photo should be personal information. So you're going to start to tag some fields for sensitive. Why are you doing that? Well, actually, because I want to keep track of these. And that's also where the documentation becomes important. Everything here is linked together, so that means also that my documentation can be automatically deduced from what I have defined here. So what I can do is I can create a documentation of my full project. So if I go here to my default documentation and I execute that, what is the system going to do? It's going to create a full documentation. See that it's generating this documentation. It's a document file, it's a PDF file that is going to contain the full documentation list of this project. So it's going to give me all the fields and all the tables that are created in this project and how they are related with each other. So if you let the system, it's taking some time to process because it has a few hundreds of pages. I think it will be a quite important file. Here it is. So this is the full documentation. You see a document with several hundreds of pages, and I will find, for instance, here the people table that we were talking before. In the people table, you had this name, the full name. If you click there, you see what type of field it is, so you can navigate inside the documentation and find back all the information, all the way even down to the Qlik model. So this is a full documentation. Now what you can do, because we tagged some sensitive information, is that instead of creating the full documentation, you can, for instance, look at the sensitive information. If I do this, it will generate another type of documentation, and this documentation now is going to be sensitive information. So it will only contain the information, the sensitive information. So if you look here, you will see that you will find the full name, the preferred name, the fax number, and the photo that we tagged before. So this is very useful if you want to make sure that you know where the sensitive information is being used all the way down to your dashboards. Very useful to know, of course, that everything is linked together. And again, if something changes, if for instance, a person asks, can you please remove me from all your databases? Well, you know where you need to go. You just remove the field here and it will automatically be removed, or you're going to track where in what fields you will find back the data, and you can update it in an automatic way. So that's also one of the advantages that you have of this solution is by using it centrally. There are a few other advantages, of course. But I've just shown some of the capabilities, but there are a lot of other things that are happening in an automated way. For instance, one of the things that you want to do very often when you're using a data warehouse is you want to keep the history of what you have created. So to keep your history, what you can do here is to say, for instance, I have customers. You have here customers, and this customer table actually they have an address and a postal code, but a customer can change his address. So in 2019, he has a certain address. In 2020, he has a different address. But if I do reporting of 2019, I want still to keep his old address because it was a sales on his old address. And this year, I want to change his address. So I want to keep the history of this address. How can I do that? Well, actually, I'm creating what we call a history. So we're going here to the table settings, and we just check the history checkbox here. And to be able to do that, I need to keep the data before so that I can compare it. So I select just check the history checkbox, and you see that there is a little H coming here on the table. That means that now this table is doing history. What is history? Well, it's actually applying, if you look at the history settings, the slow changing dimension settings that you find in a regular data warehousing approach, in which you're going to define type 1, type 2, and based on the key and the date fields. For instance, you would have the address and the name that when it's changed, when it's changed, it should get updated. But if it's an address, I want to keep the history and have a start and an end date. So I only need just to check those elements here, and he will start keeping the history. I don't need to do all this complex programming in SQL to manage all these dimensions and things like that. I can just work with that by checking the checkbox history. And you have the same, for instance, if you want to do incremental loads. If I want to have orders and every week I have new orders, I don't want to reload everything. So again, I go here to the table settings, and now instead of history, I'm going to data extraction, and I say, please activate incremental loads. And by activating incremental loads, you see now that you have a little I. Now, automatically, this table is getting loaded automatically on an incremental way. So that means that it's going to create the appropriate fields with timestamps and all these things in order to manage incremental loads. It can reuse the change data capture capabilities of the data source, and so on and so forth. So you see, just by a few clicks, you do a lot of operations that takes a lot of time if you want to implement that in SQL. That does not mean that there is no SQL behind. So you can still, at all times, go and see in the advanced mode, for instance, well, actually, what is the different code that is behind? So you have a code, an SSIS package code, you have a data cleansing code. So you can still interact with this code, but the code is actually it's actually just automatically generated in this case. The same go here when you're going to push things to Qlik. Well, actually, it's going to generate automatically the Qlik send script. But of course, you can still modify that afterwards, or complement that script with some additional parts of the script. So you are always able to do more, but it will do a lot of things automatically, which makes your life much easier. So that's, in a nutshell, what I wanted to show with TimeXtender. Now, I would like also quickly to show you some another example that we take from one of our real-life cases. We are actually proposing a solution that we call MedDiscovery 2. And MedDiscovery 2 is actually using this TimeXtender approach with these different layers, but for hospitals and medical organizations, in order to automatically generate a data warehouse based on specific sources. So let me show you quickly what it looks like. So I'm going to open a MedDiscovery project. There we are. And by opening this, you'll see that it's going to automatically connect towards medical sources. So you have the tarification and the invoicing sources, which is called TARFAC. You have the admission system with all the patients that are coming in, which we call ADT OSCAR. You will have pharmaceutical information here in MedSoc. It's actually going to the pharmacy data. And you see that we're going to deploy that into an ODX. We call this here, for instance, the ODX TARFAC is coming together with the ODX that comes from the pharmacy source, and that comes from all the different sources. You even have some specific Belgian things like the Inami Risif stuff. And then it's coming together into a staging layer that we call the hub. If you look here at the hub, you will find patient information that is coming from the TARFAC system, so the tarification system and invoicing, but also patient information that is coming from another source, like in this case, the OSCAR source, which is actually the admission system. So yeah, those two are actually coming together into a patient hub so that it can be pushed towards the patient dimension in our data warehouse. So that means we can deploy this solution using TimeXtender into different hospitals, and each hospital can have a different source. One can use a specific source, one can use another source. We only need to adapt the ODX part. The warehouse part remains the same and remains centrally available. And here also at the end, we push the information to, in this case, to Qlik Sense. So here we will have a Qlik Sense application that is getting pushed, and at the end, you will have automatically this complex star schema here that has been defined in Qlik Sense, that we didn't create that in Qlik Sense. This was created directly inside the semantic layer that you see here. And you will see that we do a lot of transformations. And again, as I showed you before, if you want now to know this patient information, where does it come from? Well, you just go to the visualization, you go to the data lineage part, and it's going to show you that this patient information is coming from all those different sources. And you see that you will find here the patient number coming from the TARFAC system and the patient number coming from the OSCAR system, the admission ADT system. So you see, and just by clicking there, it will bring me back to the original source that you see behind, or by clicking on one of those elements here, it will bring me back at the different layers, at the different levels where I am in my full end-to-end solution. So this is just an example to show you that TimeXtender can make you save a lot of time by just implementing those layers. And you see that everything is linked together, as you can see here in this solution. Good. So to wrap up, well, what we have seen here is a solution, is a system where you have actually an intelligent way to combine, to adapt, to orchestrate your solution. That's what we propose by doing it in a central way. It is, of course, also future-proof, because if you start investing in that, because it decouples your business logic from the underlying platform, if you decide today to push it to Qlik and tomorrow to push it to Power BI or the opposite, you will still be able to use your investment. Also, if you want to adapt what you've built, you just have to make a few changes and automatically everything will be pushed all the way down to your final project components. So that's what we propose here, to have an intelligent way to orchestrate and to organize in a more efficient way. Next to that intelligent system, of course, one of the things that is also very important is that everything goes much quicker. It's the accelerated part. Because everything is code-free, the code is generated automatically. Well, when you develop there, you've seen that we have just added invoices in a data warehouse in our demo in just a few minutes. Of course, in a real project, it takes more than a few minutes because you have to think about a lot of things, but still, you will go way faster than if you have to code everything in SQL. So this acceleration is really one of the benefits that you get with such a system. Of course, not only because it is automatically generated, but also because it can be quickly deployed, for instance, toward the clouds in Azure. You can also push it to several environments. One of the things that I haven't shown, but TimeXtender allows you to maintain different versions so that you can roll back to a previous version. You can also push from test to the from development to test, from test to production. All these things can be done in a central way and makes it much easier to manage. And then, of course, one of the aspects that we've shown also is that you will have an environment, because everything is defined in a central repository. Well, you will have documentation. So you can actually automate this documentation. You can ensure that you are compliant, that you always have data that is up to date. And it is your data dictionary, but also your metadata definition, because you also have your semantic layer definition in there. Good. So that's what we're going to allow you is to have this system to support all the different layers that you have in your data architecture. And whatever the front end is that you want to use on top of that, be it Qlik or Tableau or Power BI or even data scientist tools, it will be supported by Discovery Hub. Good. This brings us to the questions. I don't know if Edwin, if you have received a few questions.
Yeah, I have received. We have time for two because it's almost noon. So a first one. So somebody says, you told that you can run a TimeXtender on premise or in the cloud, but if I would run it in Azure, what do I do with my data that is on premise, like in SAP? So how do you integrate that data?
So that's also one of the advantages, that your sources can be hybrid. So that means that you could have some part of the sources that are actually in Azure or in the cloud, and you can have some part of the sources that is actually on premise. So what you would have then is that Discovery Hub will be able to push that data to the clouds in the ODX and staging layer, so that it can bring together different sources that are both on premise and in the cloud.
Okay, and then a last question: how long does it typically take to learn TimeXtender, to set it up, and how long does the setup itself take?
So on a technical perspective, setting up TimeXtender goes very quickly, because you need to install just a central server to set it up and have a database in SQL Server that is available. So that goes very quickly. And then, of course, what you need to do is you're going to define your different data sources. So you're going to make the connectivity to those data sources. So we're talking here about a setup that takes days or weeks, depending, of course, on the complexity of your system. So full projects can be a matter of days of weeks also, because you will very quickly get your data warehouse, as we have shown in the demo. And this is something that can be constructed iteratively. So you can start with a small project and then build it up. So we are very, very far from the classical projects that takes months or years that we had previously in the heavy data warehouse projects.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Francois. We are at the end of the session. Thank you all for your participation. If you have further questions, don't hesitate to contact us. And with that, I want to say stay safe and stay healthy. Bye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.